Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Hi, and welcome to Sarah and Mike's Best Picture Podcast. I'm Michael Cole, and this is episode number 26. This week, we're kicking off the 1950s with All About Eve. The film is directed by Joseph L. Mankiewicz, starring Bette Davis, Anne Baxter, George Sanders, Celeste Holm, and Thelma Ritter. It won 6 Oscars for Best Actor in a Supporting Role, George Sanders, Best Director, Best Writing, Screenplay, Best Costume Design, Black and White, Best Sound Recording, and Best Picture. It was also nominated for Best Actress in a Leading Role for Anne Baxter, Best Actress in a Leading Role for Bette Davis, Best Actress in a Supporting Role for Celeste Holm, and Best Actress in a Supporting Role for Thelma Ritter. Best Cinematography, Black and White, Best Art Direction, Set Decoration, Black and White, Best Film Editing, and Best Music Scoring of a Dramatic or Comedy Picture. It beat for Best Picture. It beat for the Best Picture Oscar Born Yesterday, Father of the Bride, King Solomon's Mines, and Sunset Boulevard. With me, as always, is my wife and co-host, Sarah.
Good evening.
So what'd you think about All About Eve?
I think it is potentially my favorite Best Picture so far. I thought it was really good.
Yeah.
I loved it. And every performance was amazing.
Right. And I think that the performances, while they still are in that old style, they're a little more contemporary than a lot that we've seen.
Definitely. And you could see that there was a lot of famous lines that came out of that movie, and we know there's, inspiration that later was based off of that. But buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy ride, like you had said, and that's definitely potentially where that saying came from. I don't know, but
I think that it was probably a thing that was said in a commercial or something, because she says, buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy night, which is clearly a play on it's going to be a bumpy ride, to buckle up. So I think that it came from somewhere else, but this is where really stylized
think about it, when did seatbelts come into play?
Seatbelts didn't come into,
were they in cars?
They weren't legally mandated until...
No, but when were they put in cars? Because, I think,
She said buckle up, so, clearly...
Yeah. I know, but I just think,
Yeah.
It was, I don't know, that part was fun to me.
Yeah.
That's, a small part, but...
Yeah.
I
thought...
It was really good. Eve was just, so convincing on, how crazy she was. And...
Well, at first she's convincing as sweet and, innocent, I think.
There's always something, a little off about her.
Yeah.
About, the very first story that she told, Margot's character was, kind of a con artist kind of story.
Yeah,
in my opinion. But it didn't ever really fool me, but...
So, I think that one thing that kind of you and I are not getting the benefit of that people in 1950 might have is... there's this thing where you've seen the movies that come from a movie so many times that you get
true.
that it somewhat spoils. When I was a teenager, my friend Wes never saw the movie Dead Poets Society, but he had seen half a dozen movies that were clearly inspired by it, and he didn't. And so whenever people would talk about it, he didn't get what was special about it. And then he finally saw it and had the realization, that it came 5 to 10 years before any of those other movies. And he realized, oh, this movie is what everyone else is knocking off, and they're not doing as good of a job.
Yeah.
I think, and so it kind of does take some of the elements of surprise or that out of it. But so I think that if we had never seen a movie where a character like Eve had existed, we probably would have been way more surprised by her just going from generic sweet girl to crazy person, like this crazy stalker and planning con artist kind of person.
I also think that another thing that's interesting is like even Margot's character like wasn't super normal, and she was kind of like
just to clarify,
dramatic.
Margot is Bette Davis, Bette Davis's character, and Eve is played by Anne Baxter. And the basic idea of the story is that Eve is a young woman who is obsessed with the performances of this older actress, and you think that she's just a big fan, and then slowly she kind of like uses her fandom to step into the world of theater, and then eventually kind of usurps the Margot character in like a really in a bunch of different little conniving ways, just to give you a clear idea of what we're talking about, in case you haven't seen the film. Yeah, I thought that they did. I think that Thelma Ritter who played Birdie was nominated. Now Birdie is a fairly small character, and so she was very good in the character, but the character was significantly less important structurally. But the other four characters that were nominated, the parts that were nominated were very integral, and they all did their parts perfectly, I thought. I think that Bette Davis as Margot plays the role of a woman who is self-conscious and confident, like that balance perfect of like, I mean, she is an actress, so I'm sure there was a bit of realism to that, but like the idea of somebody who knows that a younger woman is likely to come in and start taking parts in a industry that doesn't value age and experience. They want younger. She does perfectly. And then you've got Eve, Anne Baxter as Eve. I think she plays the sweet notes perfectly. She turns on a dime perfectly, and she plays like borderline evil perfectly. But then, and obviously those are the two leading characters. But you've got George Sanders plays this theater critic who I think might be the most interesting character in the whole thing, because he is the only one who isn't fooled by Eve. He is seemingly all-knowing, to the point where, like, at the very beginning, before there's even, like, a hint to any other character that she's full of it, he's testing her. He says, "What theater did you see her at in San Francisco?" And this is, like, 15 minutes into the movie, and it's kind of what foreshadows to us, the audience, that she's a con artist. Is that like he's asking, and it's clear like why he's asking to us, but like he's so all knowing that at the end of the movie, Eve has gotten seemingly everything she wanted, and when she gets back to her apartment, there's a woman in her apartment who snuck in because she's a really big fan and she wants to help her out, and she's Eve's Eve basically. And George Sanders' character, what's the name? Addison DeWitt. He shows up at the door because she forgot her award, and he gives the assistant the award and says, "Do you want to be like her?" And she says, "Yes." Or, "Do you want one of these awards?" And he says, "Ask Eve. She'll be able to tell you how to get it," because he's so all-knowing that even from the 10 seconds that he meets her, he knows, oh, you're doing the same thing to her that she did to Margot. And I thought that I like the idea of an all-knowing side character who just like knows, who cannot.
I thought that was pretty unique.
Kind of puppet mastery. I mean,
also like there was a spot in in the movie when kind of like all of her true story is revealed.
Yeah.
And Mr. DeWitt is like, "Hey, killer," and like he like casually calls her that, and she's like, "Oh, me? Like that's not me." And she kind of like is like, but there's something inside of her that like she knows that he knows more. So she's like, "I gotta go take a nap," and she like wants to get rid of him, and he's like, "No, no."
Yeah.
And for a while, I thought he was trying to like make a play for her romantically, which it does still seem when she's getting the award that they are romantically involved.
I get the feeling it's all ego with him, though.
I think so too, but it's really weird because you never really see them kiss.
Right.
You always see him kind of like.
I don't think he wants her romantically.
Hold
I think
her, like not hold her, but like almost like a puppet, kind of like guide her with her shoulders. Yeah. Like he's always like putting her coat on, or he's like kind of moving her where he wants her, like with his hands on her shoulders. But it's not super romantic.
I don't think...
He says at one point, he says, like, "You're going to belong to me." And then he goes and basically is like, "This is your real name. Like, you lied about all of that stuff. And, like, this is what really happened." And, he shows, like, "Oh, you're just trying to break up these marriages just to, like, use it as, like, a further leg up to get more fame." And,
right.
he meant like, "You're gonna be kind of like blackmailed by me."
Right. Well, I think he wants her to be successful because he will be able to say, "I discovered her," and I think that's what his whole play is.
Yeah.
From the whole, and I think when he said, and I think he knows that all these things she thinks are going to be great legs up are ultimately distractions or things that will tar her or tarnish her image. And he wants her to get to the ultimate, whatever level it is, without any of that stuff, so that she is pristine in that way.
Yeah.
And then he can say, "I discovered her." That's what I took it as. I saw that it looked romantic. I think the outsider characters all thought it was romantic, especially with earlier in the movie before he discovers Eve. He is with Marilyn Monroe in a very small part.
Yeah, that was cool.
And I got the same feeling because as soon as he realizes, like when she auditions for the part opposite Margot, and realizes that she's not going to get the part, and they say something about her going back to the Copacabana to keep working or whatever, he's done with her. And I think it's because, we all, and I'm sure the audience all, see Marilyn Monroe, arguably the prettiest I've ever seen her, the most beautiful she's ever been.
Yeah.
And and fairly young, and we see that and we think, well, of course he wants her for whether it's just to have arm candy or whatever. And I think as soon as he realizes she doesn't have the talent to make it, he's done with her because he doesn't care about that. He just wants to be the man who discovered the next big thing.
Yeah. And
I think I think the reason they put the Marilyn Monroe character in is to help us see that that's what he's about.
Right.
And to make us, even though there is some level where you're thinking like, well, Marilyn Monroe's beautiful, and then Anne Baxter's very attractive. You kind of assume that, and I think that he plays that. But I also could see his character, they wouldn't outright say it, but I could see his character being homosexual, based on like the way he plays it and everything else. And he's a theater critic, so there's all kinds of things like that. So I never took it as he was necessarily interested in her. I think there was no sex or romantic entanglement whatsoever in either situation. I think he is a focused man on his legacy as a theater critic in a time when I would imagine, I know that in the 70s, movie critics became they were the pinnacle of like, this is where if you want to see something that's artsy and different and cool, you go to a movie critic, more so than we've ever seen in our lives. And so I'm assuming that theater critics are the same thing. They weren't just a guy or a woman who went and saw a show and did a write-up, but they were they were, the kind of what we would consider like a food critic to be today, where they're taste makers, and I think that is such an important status thing for him.
Yeah.
Now I could be reading way into that. I don't know.
I just found it was like interesting.
Yeah.
When they started that conversation, because you're kind of just like, where is this gonna go? And
yeah,
it, like for a little bit, it looked like he was like, oh, you're not gonna be with Lloyd, you're gonna be with me.
Right.
And I thought that was a really cool twist.
Yeah, but he was important. It was important that he never said it that way. He always said, "I own you." And I think what he meant was
just like, I agree with you that is definitely what it was, but
yeah,
I just thought it was like so different.
Yeah.
To twist it like that.
Yeah, that's. I liked. I think he added a lot to it, because otherwise, I think he added, like, we needed that extra level on it. So the last character that I didn't really mention is I'm totally gonna space on her name. Celeste Holm's character, the Margot's best friend.
Corin or Karen?
Karen. Yeah, you're right, Karen. Cora was the character.
I know Cora was the character, but
yeah.
they said it really weird a couple times. A couple of people said it. Yeah. It didn't sound like regular Karen.
Yeah. But. So Celeste Holm plays Karen, who is supposed to be Bette Davis's or Margot's best friend and the wife of the playwright who's writing all these plays, and she's interesting in a couple of really integral ways, because she is the one who introduces Eve to Margot. She sees Eve standing out after the show and says, "Why don't you come in with me and you can meet her?" And then kind of boosts her and gets her in as a personal assistant and gets things moving along. Then later in the movie, she's the one who kind of helps Margot, or helps Eve get a little bit of a big break by she's a little irritated with Margot, so she decides to delay Margot so that she misses a performance, which allows Eve to play as the understudy, to kind of shine, and it happens in such a way that it basically makes Eve's career and starts off her career, and then Eve wants Margot's husband, or wants Karen's husband, and so she manipulates this woman in so many ways and hurts her in so many ways, and turns her against her best friend a couple times, blackmails her, and it's really, she is probably the most sympathetic character in the whole movie, I would think, don't you? With Karen?
Yeah, for sure.
Because she's genuinely trying to see the good in Eve, and she's trying to be a good friend to Margot, and she just gets kind of beaten up by both. Her husband, so Eve at one point mentions that Karen's husband's gonna leave her, and we don't fully get whether they imply that that's not true, or that it's not, she's gonna leave her for Eve. He's gonna leave her for Eve. But we don't really fully get the vibe on that, because there is something weird going on. And they don't ever really settle that. So you just get the feeling that Karen is kind of getting beaten up on all sides. Don't you think?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do. I think she also gave a good performance.
Yeah.
The only thing is, they never really fully address, if she really did help Eve get, that night.
Yeah.
To, if she was the one that did it on purpose or not.
They really imply it.
They do.
Because Eve blackmails Karen and says, he knows what you did, and it'll ruin you guys in the theater. If they know that you backstabbed your best friend that way, basically.
Right.
Let's see, I have a little bit of. So this movie is it shares the record for most Oscar nominations at 14 with Titanic and La La Land.
Wow.
This is one, even though it's funny because I'm not sure that it's necessarily remembered as being as big as it is. I mean, I think a lot of people know all about Eve, but like we've seen Gone with the Wind, which was massive, and box office wise would be adjusted for inflation is the highest grossing film of all time. We've got Casablanca. I'm trying to think. There isn't a whole lot else so far that's been huge, but like this is one of the three biggest successes, I think, of this first 20 years of Best Pictures that we've covered.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You can just tell it's like a clear.
Yeah. And did you watch all of Sunset Boulevard with me a couple years ago when I got it from Netflix? I know. What's it called? Sunset Boulevard. It was the one where the guy.
That sounds familiar. Yeah,
it was one of the Best Picture nominees in 1950 that All About Eve beat. And it's also a movie about show business. That's more about Hollywood. This is obviously more about Broadway.
I think I did watch it.
Yeah. It's interesting because both are about older actresses.
Yes.
Dealing with, and very different movies in a lot of other ways, but in a couple of ways, including both movies have hugely iconic lines. Like this one has the bumpy night line, and am I echoing?
I don't think so.
No. Anyway, this one has the bumpy night line, and Sunset Boulevard has the I'm ready for my close up, Mr. DeVille. No, to Mr. DeMille.
Yep.
I'm trying to think. I think they both have like 4 or 5 lines that are huge.
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard of Born Yesterday or King Solomon's Mines. Father of the Bride is obviously not the Steve Martin one, but the Steve Martin one's a remake of Father of the Bride. But
oh, that's cool.
Yeah. This was a pretty good way to end the black and whites. Not to say that we're done with black and whites, but we're done with the long stretch. Because next week we've got next week is an American in Paris, which is color. I'm pretty sure it's color. I'm like 99% sure it's color. And then we've got, I think then it's like black and white color, black and white color, black and white color for a couple of weeks. And then we're basically into color for until Schindler's List. But this is, other than there's one shot that you and I both commented on. So there's one shot, instead of green screen, back what they used to do before green screen was they would put people in front of a projector, and the projector would display what was supposed to be the background. So you'll see a lot of that in car shoots a lot of times in older movies. A lot of like times they'll have like the road going, but this one has Eve and DeWitt walking in front of a projection screen, and it is terribly done technically. The scene's fine if you're just paying attention to the dialogue, but I was going to say, other than that one shot, this movie I think is really stunning. It's one of the better like visual black and whites that we've covered, I think. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Like this, there was no point.
Which is interesting because there isn't really even.
There's nothing
that much like that's scenic about it.
Right.
But yeah, totally.
Yeah. I
mean, this is definitely the most modern one.
Yeah.
It makes sense. It's the newest, but
right.
It's like a huge jump from the last movie, even.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, the format for us was like a even
it was a perfect
skinnier than square almost.
It was a really, really narrow. It was
super narrow. Which, I mean, it's not. You get used to it. Eventually, you forget about it. Yeah. But it's a little distracting. It's not what we're used to anymore.
Yeah, it's true. I think the black and white fits this. Like some of them I've been like, oh, why? But I think
this one also, like, I just feel like it's pretty timeless.
Yeah, but it has like a
all of the themes and all of all of the problems are problems that could happen today without any. There's nothing that has like aged and like where you're like, oh, that's clearly the like old times.
Yeah. The only thing is that like a background check would be so much easier on Eve, but other than that, yeah.
The other thing
I think, but I want to say one thing else.
You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do a background check for.
If you're hiring, if they were hiring her, they might anyway.
Yeah.
But I just want to say one more thing about the black and white though is that like I think this, even though I wouldn't consider this a noir film, it has a lot of noir style elements that kind of made it fit with the black and white, I think. There is an air of mystery even before you realize she's a con artist. There's just something going on that black and white really gives it a flavor in a way that like a lot of the others we've talked about it a bunch of times now on this podcast of like why was this black and white? Like we know they had color, but like this one makes sense.
In black and white.
Yeah.
Also, another thing where this is just like a side note, I'm just thinking about this in my head, that I think for a lot of us that are 20, 30, 40, 50 in that range years old right now.
Yeah.
We all, at least I do, I think like 1950 as being 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Because that's like when I became like conscious of timelines and history and all that. I was 12.
But this one was almost 70 years old.
70 years old.
Yeah.
Which is insane to think about. Because I bet a lot of people are thinking, 1950, 50 years ago. No, 70.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. Like, this, well, we're going to start to see some movies that are going to look modern. And we're only a couple years away. We're about maybe 10 years away from modern acting.
Yeah.
Actually,
but this was fine.
We've got on the waterfront coming up soon.
Yeah. But the way they spoke in this movie was relatively normal. There was nothing about this other than the fact of Eve being like, where a couple times you're like, she is just psycho. Where she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, everything is fine.
Yeah. I think that with this movie too, because it's about actors, you can forgive a lot of the like Bette Davis. The way her character speaks is so melodramatic in a lot of scenes, but you're like, well, she's an actress who's been doing it forever, so like it makes sense.
I really loved the relationship between Margot and Max. Like,
no, Max was the director.
Oh, not Max.
Bob.
Sorry.
No. Bill.
Bill? Yeah, Bill. That's right.
Yeah, Bill's the boyfriend. He's the director, but he's also Margot's boyfriend.
And he really loves her, and he's like super loyal, and he's pretty much the only one that like never wavers, and like he does what he has to do his job, but like he refuses Eve's character like romantically, and he even like puts up a stand even when it's Margot's like, I'm fine with like not being Cora, like I'd rather be like a housewife, like I've done this long enough, I don't need to play a role that's too old for me anyway, or whatever. Not too old, too young for her. She's too old for it. But he's still like, he has a tough time directing Eve as Cora.
Yeah.
Like I just thought that he was like super sweet, and he's really like nice with her. Like even though like the only moment is like that first party that they throw, and he's like downstairs talking to her. But he's not even doing anything really wrong. He's just, like, being nice to her. And it's before he knows that Margot's already, like, sick of Eve and is like, I need to, like, get my... Like, she's copying everything I do. She's my shadow. Like, I can't deal.
Yeah.
But... no complaints from me. Like, this one was, like, very good to watch. I loved it. And, like, I thought it was funny, too, like, Mr. DeWitt was in Rebecca, and he kind of almost plays the same character. Like, he's the one that kind of stirs the pot. He's the one that, like, gets to reveal, like, the truth of the story.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. And, like, Eve is, like, psycho, just like the maid in Rebecca. And kind of in the same way. Like, they're both enamored with someone, and they're just, like, they're so crazy that, like, no one calls them on it because they just seem, like, out of touch. And, like, in this movie, too, like, a little differently in this movie, like, Eve, everyone's like, oh, Eve's so nice, and, you know, they're kind of fooled by her in a way. But, like, even in Rebecca, the husband is protective of that maid and is like, you know, like, she's good at her job or whatever. Like, you know, and I don't know. It was kind of funny, and I kept thinking to myself, like, we've definitely seen that guy, Mr. DeWitt. Like, what has he been in?
Well,
and he was in Rebecca.
Most people will recognize his voice. So George Sanders, who played played Addison DeWitt, he was also the voice of Shere Khan in the original Disney Jungle Book, which is like another.
Is that the jaguar?
Is he a panther or jaguar? Isn't he Shere Khan the bad guy?
The panther and a jaguar, I think, are the same thing depending on where they're located.
I think a panther is specifically black, and a jaguar is not black.
I think a jaguar
That's not right.
Black.
There's no way that's right.
Yeah, no, like Florida panther, but like in Africa, they're a jaguar. I'm pretty sure.
It's the Jacksonville Jaguars. But I know that, like, a bobcat is considered
I think they're interchangeable, like lynx in Canada.
Yeah, I think bobcats and mountain lions are the same thing.
Mountain lion looks like a lion.
Does it?
Yeah, but a bobcat is a lynx.
Alright, let's go off on a tangent about cats of prey or whatever.
I don't even know how we got on that.
Because he played the voice of Shere Khan.
Oh. No, they're different.
Yeah.
The jaguar has spots like a cheetah, but I think there's some similarity about them.
Yeah.
They kind of look the same, except they have
different colors. Either one would maul you to death. That's
they're
the similarity.
Same size.
Yeah. One is the highest grossing domestic film of the year.
The jaguar is a wild cat species and the only extant member of the genus Panthera native to the Americas.
Okay.
So they're related.
Okay. I would have guessed. Anyway,
Black Panther
made $700 million in the U.S.
Black Panther. Black jaguars may produce either black or spotted cubs. They're similar. I'm right.
I think I was right when I said one's just the black version of the other. Anyway, what we're gonna I don't know how much trivia there is. One thing that I thought was interesting is so
yes, those same. Sorry. I just have to finish this. Black panthers in Asia and Africa are leopards, and those in Americas are black jaguars. I don't know.
Nice. Okay.
So
if you get a black Jaguar car, can you call it a Black Panther?
Yeah.
That's cool.
I think that someone should get a black Jaguar and have Panther as the license plate.
Nice. So Bette Davis was fairly notorious for not getting along well with female co-stars. During the filming of this, there was a lot of speculation in the press that she didn't get along with Anne Baxter, who played Eve, and because their characters weren't getting along in the movie, which people knew because it was based on a short story, because of that, they kind of played it up a little bit, but they actually really liked each other. What's interesting, though, is that Bette Davis's character's best friend in the movie is Celeste Holm, and she hated Celeste Holm. She she said that like the whole experience was good except for working with Celeste Holm. There was like a lot of drama on set. It seems like Bette Davis's voice is a little bit raspy in this. Cool. It's a little bit raspy in this because she screamed. She was getting a divorce at the time of making this movie, and she had screamed at her husband so loudly that she like burst a blood vessel in her throat, and so like a lot of her voice is like affected by it in this movie. George Sanders was recently married to Zsa Zsa Gabor when they made this film, and so she hated the fact that he was working closely with Marilyn Monroe in a couple scenes, and so like on the days when Marilyn Monroe was going to be there, she would show up. Zsa Zsa Gabor would show up to kind of like supervise. It just sounds like there was like a ton of like weird little things like that. Like Bette Davis had like basically gotten out of her contract at 20th Century Fox because she didn't like Daryl Zanuck, is that what it was? But Joseph Mankiewicz like insisted that it was her for the part, and so they he like basically the two of them had been fighting. Daryl Zanuck or whatever had been fighting with Bette Davis, so they had to get together. So like this movie had almost as much drama behind the scenes as in the movie itself, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have anything else specifically that we want to talk about with it? I don't think. I mean, we covered everything, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say, I think that it won Best Screenplay. I think it's one of the best written of the best pictures that we've seen. Like, there's been a lot that have had something that's, made the film. Like, whether it be one performance or, with Wings, it was like all the visual dynamic stuff. And like, we've seen a lot of elements. This is one of the best written, I think, of all the ones we've seen.
Yeah.
I mean, Casablanca is arguably the greatest screenplay ever made, or ever written. But like this is probably in the top 3 screenplays of the 24, 23, whatever films that we've covered so far. Don't you think?
Yeah, for sure.
Like if I was gonna rank it, I would say it would be this, Casablanca, and probably I really, really liked It Happened One Night screenplay. I think those are my top 3.
Yeah. Although
Gone with the Wind was amazing too, but all right. I don't think there's anything else for us to cover. Next week, like I said before, we're going to be doing An American in Paris, which is a color film. It's a musical, and it's got Gene Kelly, so it'll be an interesting one for us. We haven't done we've done a couple musicals that were more like randomly throwing songs in, but this is the first time I think that we're going to have a musical where the songs are different, like they're part of the story, or they're not like, it's not like, oh, let's all stand by the piano and play a song, or like, oh, we're chorus girls in a show, let's do, like this is the first time it's going to be like what we consider a modern musical is next week with An American in Paris.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't remember liking it that much, but that's been the case with like at least 50% of the movies so far in this podcast journey, so hopefully I'll be wrong about that one as well. I think I was talking to my mother recently about American in Paris, and I think part of the expectation problem is when I first saw it, I had just seen Singing in the Rain, which is also Gene Kelly, and arguably the greatest movie musical of all time. And so maybe now, with a little bit more separation, I'll be able to appreciate it better, which has been the case for most of these movies. Yeah. All right. So until next time, if you want to watch along with us, try to check out An American in Paris by next week. Although at the rate we're going, you probably have 2 weeks. It's real tough with a 2-year-old to sit down and watch a movie. And luckily we've come to the end of most of our vacation kind of stuff for the summer, but it hasn't gotten much easier. But if you want to watch ahead, we've got after that, I think we've got On the Waterfront coming up soon. We got the movie Marty, a couple From Here to Eternity. So we got a few ones that you might want to watch ahead of time. And if you have any comments or questions or trivia on any of the movies that we're going to be covering, please feel free to email us at Mike Diamond 82984@gmail.com. We'd love to have any comments or questions on the show. If you could do us a favor, go on and review this podcast or give it a thumbs up, or depending on what you're listening to it through, just give us a review or a thumbs up or whatever it allows you to do for us. And if you want, you can check out all of our other media stuff at chocolatediamondmedia.com. We're going to have a new video or 2 up this weekend. Actually, might have 3 up this weekend if I can get everything I need done. And so we got some cool video content coming up. We're almost done with our Indiegogo Kickstarter, our Indiegogo campaign, which is raising money for a feature film. So check out all the stuff that we've got a lot of content right now at chocolatediamondmedia.com. Beyond that, like I said, next week we're going to be talking about American in Paris, and we will talk to you then.